Hello listeners, and welcome to the Montel Weekly Podcast, bringing you energy matters in an informal setting. My name is Richard Sverrisson, and today I'm joined by Bryan, Senior Energy and Commodity Analyst at Alfa Energy, and by Paolo Coghe, President of Consultancy Acousmatics. A warm welcome to you both. I thought today what we'd be talking about mainly is the gas market and what's happening, the general dynamics here, and also what the implications are for the wider energy complex, the fuels, etc., the power market in Europe. This summer, gas prices touched historic lows, Wayne, didn't they? Although they've sort of recovered a bit since.
Slightly recovered, but we've seen a softness again over the past couple of days.
So what's happening? What's going on?
I think I mentioned to you this before. When we looked at the gas markets a few months ago, and even at the conferences that I've presented at for you guys, one of my main concerns and big drivers for the market was what's going on globally in the economics. You've seen the last few days, I think Chinese industrial production was at a 17-year low in terms of growth. You've seen all the bad PMI numbers indicating to a slowdown in manufacturing. Yesterday you saw the US and the UK yield curves invert, which can give a sign that we could see a recession. So all these, for me, aside from the usual fundamentals, this is something that I've been looking at as a potential, as a downside driver for gas markets. And we've seen the last couple of days what that downturn and lower growth outlook for global economics has done to carbon. When I left the office earlier, it was 26.80, sort of three-week low. Crude pushed down to around the 58s again when I left the office earlier. Coal prices, I saw that the revised price for 2019 2020 has been revised down by UBS, and again they're pointing to the changes globally in terms of outlook, and for me, so that's had a big impact. But also, as I mentioned to you before as well, we've seen the supply has been very robust throughout this summer. We have seen some what I will call commercial flow reduction coming from Equinor in terms of what's coming through Langley, which has had an impact. But we've seen
large in the last few days.
The last month or two, we've had a few spanners in the works, which has helped boost the price, the spot market. But what I've seen, again, is something I've pointed out before, is what's going on with Russia. They've been proving that they're not really there for price; they're there for market share. If you look at the flows that have been coming out of Russia, they've been very strong. As well as that, look at the ESP, their electronic sales platform, that's been really active. And I think they're going to keep pumping gas regardless. And I've noted in some instances when we've seen fall downs in Langley, Russia have stepped up and increased volumes. And one of the big things I saw this summer, Nord Stream maintenance occurred. Generally, they wouldn't normally reroute, but they rerouted a lot of gas. I think it was through Malmö. And we saw unexpected amounts of volumes coming into Europe. So that's having an impact.
So it's a combination of the macro and also the supply and demand fundamentals within the gas segment. Would you agree, Paolo, that the global environment is
definitely
really precarious?
Wayne makes my job easy. I agree with everything he said. I will truly do, and I will add to that what we're seeing is this. Globalization has helped us in terms of gas price. Has given us lower gas prices, plenty of supply, even with European demand being sustained. And also, it has exposed us a little bit to geopolitics on the flip side, right? So we are seeing also the tariff war with China coming through with the LNG side. We're also seeing the sanctions making their way in, if nothing else, in terms of concerns. So all to say, I agree, and geopolitics exposure has increased in these days.
But the element of that geopolitics is also a move towards more protectionism and more, keeping, breaking down some of that free trade that's existed up until now.
And to elaborate on a point that Wayne has made is that is the fact that Russians are interested in having their gas flow. It has always been the Russian story, right? Yes. And they stand by it, and you can see it by observing the flows. So these sort of, you could look at the European Union every year has these sort of winter packages and concerns with the Russian gas flow or not. And well, I think that over the last 15 years at least, even though we have had those, January crisis with the Ukraine back in the day, right? It was almost like a regular event. Russians have proven that they're in to extract their gas and flow it to where the market wants it. Now, the modern version of this story is also, though, they have focused on LNG and Asia, right? And if one wanted to be a bit cynical, one would also add that they are perhaps making the best of climate change, right? Because the Arctic route in summer is more open so than it was in the past.
So it makes that LNG more freely available, as well as the pipeline. But then, I mean, what's interesting, so if there's a drop in supply from one country or one supplier, it seems that the other's coming in and replacing that. So that's quite an interesting dynamic. So that would indicate that these low prices could be here to stay for a while, Wayne, or...
Well, I always, whenever people say that I stay for a while, I'm always not concerned, but slightly, I always like to put a caveat in whatever I say. And in terms of that respect, if all things remain equal, status quo remains, then yes, I can only see some downside, but I've been working in energy long enough to know that there's always something around the corner. And even though we see this, and this is a word that you might know actually, smorgasbord, I quite like this word.
I've heard it before.
Yeah,
a couple of
it's
times.
Swedish, I think. Even though we see this smorgasbord of bearishness in global markets, and when I say smorgasbord, I'm talking about Italy, Argentina, trade wars, Brexit. You look at all these concerns around the world building up, but again on the flip side as well, in terms of there is still some sustained demand, like you said. We've seen more increased gas for power demand, but overall, I think if we see things remain equal, I can only see a bit more downside, especially with what's going on economically. I don't see there's not much outlook for markets or equities especially to start getting a bit bullish again in the near term. Things may change. Trump might put out another tweet today. He's quite good at that. He put out a tweet last week saying that we're going to halt some of the taxes until December. You saw equities rally, oil rallied, carbon rallied, gas and power rallied. So again, he's still have an influence. So I'm still not
price driver.
He is. So I'm still not sure about what. But at the moment, I'm seeing more downside. Again, we'll see a test over the next few days, because I saw gas for winter was last traded 48. 80 or 90 this morning. Now, if you look back previously, that was the sort of level where it bounced from. So I'm interested to see where that goes down. My thought was always that we'll start seeing prices in winter really start to go down once we get into the winter.
Okay, but not before.
Not before, but we'll see it down before. But I think we'll really see it when we get into it, because we'll have the usual concerns, but let's not forget where gas storage is. Last year we had so many problems at once. Coal price was $100, oil was 70, I believe. We had concerns around storage, which was at a real low. LNG, where was it? It wasn't forthcoming, and we still managed to get through the winter. Fast forward 12 months, storages are at 83% apparently today. LNG slowdown has happened, but that's for other reasons. We can come on to that after. And demand is falling. So far, the weather outlook, I looked at some models the other day, seasonal forecast, all the signals are for a warmer start. September, October, November still look above average, and after that there's still no real signs of any chance of a beast from the east, but again that could occur. So for me,
But then the forward prices seem to be that there's a bit disjunct between the near curve and the forward prices. Is that
they're quite resilient? I'm looking at summer 20 especially for one of my clients, and that price is resilient. And again, what you've got to look at, we spoke about Ukraine. There's concerns around that deal which expires the end of December. So that for me is one of the things that's built in. There's some risk premiums built in. I do believe that will get resolved, and what we were talking about earlier alludes to that. I think the Russians want to send the gas out and they're going to come to an agreement. It's all about the time frame, I think, of this agreement: 6 months, 12 months, 1 month. That to me is the problem. But Ukraine need the finances, and Russia, they don't want to cede any market share. So I believe that that will get resolved, and we'll see some of that risk premium come off once we see an agreement. So.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, what does all this mean for European utilities? There's a lot of talk of fuel switching. So in addition to low gas prices, we've had carbon almost touching 30 euros. It's come off a bit since, as Wayne mentioned. But what does that mean for fuel switching in Europe? Because it's not possible everywhere, is it?
the correct answer is it depends, right?
Yeah, of course, as always,
but I think the story here is a story of a world that has changed. I don't see right now. I don't think, with the possible exception of gas prices, we are not in a world of commodity price extremes. Coal at 60, oil at 70, okay, power at high 40s, power in Germany. So it's not a world of extremes, and yet is a world that has changed with respect to the last time we saw this switch between gas generation spreads and coal generation spreads in Europe. We could go back about 10, 12 years, and we were just coming from a period where coal spreads were higher than gas spreads, so advantage to coal generators, and then gas spreads came up. Now this is exactly what has happened now. The big difference I see between then and now is that back then nobody was thinking or mentioning coal phase out, and the threshold for that was Paris 2015, where now it's clear that the world has maybe it's too generous to say the world, but certainly here in Europe we have moved towards a situation where we are actively phasing out coal. Some countries sooner than others, some countries are more dependent on coal than others, and this is definitely having an impact. And so in this context, carbon prices at 30, now if the question is that an extreme or not, it's a mix a little bit. Maybe sometimes carbon gets ahead of itself, but the reality is that I believe that this 30 price is the new normal for carbon, and that if that is true, and that is not going to change, then what that means is not good times ahead for coal and lignite generators, which are clearly much more polluting, about twice as more polluting as gas generation is.
Absolutely. We've seen in some company results that have come out, in July and August, that lignite generation has fallen substantially. RWE has said they've fallen by almost 25%, I think.
Uniplat said something the other day about gas.
25 terawatt hours, down 26%.
Uniper said something the other day as well about increased gas-fired generation in comparison to lignite, I think.
And so in that sense, it's tough luck. In other words, lignite and coal at this stage are price takers, right? In the merit order curve in Germany, for example. And so if gas prices go down, and they have gone down, what that means is that power prices are going to follow and go down as well. And there's nothing that lignite generation can do to change that, right? Now, the historic advantage of lignite generation is that its costs are so low that for the longest time it has been able to, withstand this situation and keep some margins positive. Now, with the latest combination of prices and the relativities of prices, this has no longer been possible for lignite generators in Germany.
Isn't it a key question as well, as you alluded to here? Is it a short-term dynamic, or is it more? This is the way it's going to be.
In my opinion, just like Wayne was saying earlier, never say never, right? But the trend is most definitely going in that direction, right? I do not see a bright future for lignite generation for sure in Europe, for coal generation as well. And then single country specifics or single company specifics can change. Somebody may be able to hold on a little longer through some smart commercial action, but the reality is that these doors have closed.
If you're a company, utility, or a producer generating both gas and lignite, how do you hedge this new world, or this new normal? You've already seen some companies, with a different kind of hedging strategy.
Yes. Well, that depends on how strong is your view based on fundamentals, and how strong on the other side is your risk appetite.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. If you are in a company that has a strong enough risk appetite, right, and a very strong belief in its own view, then you may want to behave in a certain way on the markets, right? And you would do this through your hedging. You would hedge and unhedge accordingly.
Yeah. How do you see this, Wayne? Do you, some of your clients are obviously looking closely at the way the prices are evolving, or how they're developing. They want to sort of lock in some prices. Have you noticed any change in behaviour there, or hedging activity?
Some clients, again, especially with the market has been in backwardation for the most part, the gas markets and the power markets for the past few years. We saw a little switch earlier in the year, but now we're clearly back into backwardation again. So yeah, if the price fits within their budget, people are locking in further along the curve than they used to because there's opportunities. And even though we may say, well, if you take this today at say 35 pence a therm for say 2021. We could get close to delivery, and it could be 25 or 30. However, there's always the risk it's higher. So companies are now more likely now to hedge out further than we used to see due to the opportunity that's been presented in terms of the backwardation. Because it's quite a strong visual tool. If you look at a chart and see backwardation, it's like, ooh. It's like if you said to you, can you get your car insurance, for 3 years, 30% cheaper? You'd think that's a great deal. So we've seen a lot more of that, and I think we will see more of that moving forward. Even on the flip side, clients or anybody on the spot, day ahead, etc., especially this summer, has done very well. I had a few clients on day ahead products throughout this summer, and the prices have outturned very well as we come to the end of the month and we see how that outturns. So yeah, definitely an increase in more hedging further down the curve because the opportunities presented. It's like if you look at some of the yield curves in fixed income, etc. It's a similar kind of thing.
You're locking in those low prices. Exactly. Yeah. But again, Paolo, I mean, how we're seeing the switch away from lignite and coal. But can these gas plants? Can they replace them? I mean, can they run 8,000 hours a year? And the question is
they
then
certainly
how?
Can, but it's country. The answer is country specific. In Germany, you will still need coal and lignite to some extent. You just don't have enough gas-fired generation, or a combination of gas-fired generation, let's call it more base-load type of generation, plus renewables that would allow you to completely do away with coal. Another, just to give an example of another country, France, right? Well, gas is not a big factor there, and we've seen nuclear generation volumes recover a little bit. 2019 is ahead of where 2018 was, and we've known sort of the huge peaky part of the nuclear crisis in France is behind us. So again, country specific is the answer.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, it's definitely. It's like when I did a presentation for you guys in Spain this year. We're talking about coal again. That's another example of a country specific different energy mix, etc. And also on the subject of coal, like you said, I agree with you 100%. I've said it a couple of times now. The future of coal is bleak for me, and I've had coal traders and analysts not enjoying that statement, but for me, it's a true statement. I think the future is pretty bleak for coal.
And if you're an analyst, you can see the writing on the wall sometimes, and so there is examples from, for example, companies that have made certain decisions. One that comes to mind is Saipem. So Saipem is an Italian company that builds infrastructure for essentially oil platforms and these types of infrastructures. And a few years back, they made a choice to actually put their chips on natural gas infrastructure development, and they just were awarded a couple of huge contracts in the last month or so, one of them having to do with Yamal, sanctions notwithstanding, right? They've been rewarded by deciding actually to go for gas. Okay. Yeah. So again, the writing is on the wall, but sometimes these things move very slowly, right? And you have to have the staying strength or the patience to wait. Sometimes, if you are right, but ahead of your time, you might as well not be right.
Yeah. It's very true. But you also have to be quite nimble, dynamic, and be able to make those decisions, quickly. Other examples in the gas and oil sector where these big oil majors are looking to green themselves, to green their portfolio. Correct. How much they can all succeed in that is of course another matter. What I was going to ask you, Wayne, as well, is you mentioned very robust supply, mainly from Russia, gas supply. This is, and also Norway. Do you expect and America, of course, from LNG? Yeah. How do you see this? Do you see? I mean, Russia's been pumping at record levels the previous 2 years. Norway's been around 112, 115 BCM. Do you see that piped gas? Do you see that continuing in those levels for 2019, for this year?
Definitely. Yeah. Again, I mentioned there's been some commercial flow reductions or interruptions, shall I put it, this year. We've seen a bit more evidence of that from Equinor and what the volumes we've seen through Langled, but Russia's been pretty constant. And I read some of their recent statements. I think they had a conference recently, and they were talking about prospects, and even for this year they were going to outdo last year in terms of volumes delivered to Europe, and how they're continuing on this path of providing Europe the gas it needs and providing the security it needs. So I think in terms of Russia, it will continue. Norway, yes, again, they'll continue pumping that gas. And again, America might come back into it now, because we saw a lot of LNG the first few months of the year, and then when prices dropped to where they were, it became uneconomical for them to send them cargoes. But now I saw that, is it the Henry Hub's at 3-year low? The summer price was the weakest for 20 years on the spot this year. So again, we might see some more LNG cargoes from America, because you can tell they want to participate, not only for financial reasons, but also I think for political gains. You look at the Nord Stream, I know we're going to talk about the Nord Stream 2 and the potential sanctions on that, and they seem quite intent to disrupt that. Also as well, you've seen Trump, not only Trump, but some of his advisors, they've been to Europe, they've been involved in conferences talking about LNG and how they're going to get more LNG to Europe. So I think in terms of supply, we're looking pretty good. And also I think you're going to see demand from other places start to fall, especially China. China are moving massively in the way of renewables. They've got that pipeline now as well coming from Russia that's going to start up soon. And also they're getting a lot more LNG from Australia.
Because there's a lot more trains coming online from Australia and that part of the world, isn't there? So that's adding to this. I mean, we've been talking about this a potential flood of LNG for years. But now it's finally come through.
It's finally here. I've seen a slowdown recently. That's more to do with the low price environment, and also you've seen a bit more enhanced maintenance, and maintenance has been brought forward. But again, the conditions have laid the foundations for that in terms of what we've seen in China and the Atlantic and Pacific basins last winter, both mild, summers not warm enough to stimulate massive aircon demand. Again, it's for me, the storage, it's like the coal market again, the storage levels in both basins are full, close to fullness in terms of time of year. Demand isn't there at the moment, so we've seen supply ease back a bit. But there's new installations, Freeport, Corpus Christi, there's a couple of new installations in America, there's some new startups. Prelude started, a floating LNG. So I think in terms of supply, next year will be sort of more of the same for me, unless again there's some sort of material shift or something happens, which always can.
Yep. You touched upon Nord Stream 2 and the potential for sanctions. How do you view this, Paolo?
It ties up to what I was saying a bit earlier about this exposure to this globalization driving exposure to geopolitics. I was looking at some numbers recently in terms, I think these are numbers from Oxford Institute of Energy Studies on who are the three major exporters of LNG. And if we look at these numbers, Australia comes at number 1, Qatar at number 2, and US at number 3. However, when you look at what's projected to come online next year, the US overtakes both of these countries in theory and principle, and becomes number 1. Now, what interest does the US have, right? Where is US fighting its wars, so to speak, on this geopolitical front? Well, I can pick up two adversaries immediately, right? China on one end and Russia on the other, right? And so this drive and this pressure to sort of renew or put further sanctions onto Russia, for example, come within this context, right? There is certainly a strong push for that. It's always been like this because the technology to do certain things has always been Western technology. So it's a weapon that the West has, right, in this war for market share in this case, where the West can withhold, right, and the technology, making it more difficult for Russia. But on the other hand, now if you see China coming into this play and China needing and being actually one of the largest importers in recent years of LNG, then Russians have been hindered by one side but helped by the other. So it's going to be very, very, I think next year will be extremely interesting from this point of view.
Absolutely. How do you see it panning out, Wayne? This potential, the potential sanctions, will Nord Stream come online, will that be added,
Well, I spoke about this in Dusseldorf. I said at the time that I believe it will still go ahead, and I put up a slide with several quotes from various people, some in the European Union Energy, and they were saying it's more or less completed in terms of the pipe work. You've got the issue in Denmark, obviously, but that'll get resolved. And I think Germany wants this, and they need the gas. I don't think American sanctions will be able to stop this personally. I think it will still go ahead. There might be some resistance that we might see it drag on a bit longer than expected, but I fully expect the Nord Stream 2 to be up and running very soon.
Yeah.
I don't see sanctions really stopping it, to be honest.
Certainly lots to keep track of, and a certain Twitter feed which we need to pay very, very close
Always.
attention.
I've been following it for over 12 months.
Exactly. You got it on your phone, sort of
I
pinging a
follow
notification.
it, yeah,
exactly.
as much as I loathe to follow it, I do for purposes of seeing how much he's talking and what markets it will move, and it invariably has been moving lots of markets with one quick tweet.
Absolutely. Well, that's about all from us this week. So thank you very much to Wayne and Paolo.
Thank you.
And make sure, listeners, that you tune into our Nordic Energy Day special next week. And remember to keep up to date with all our stories on Montel News. Follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and subscribe to us on iTunes and Spotify.